Welcome everyone to QuickBooks Online Inventory. We're going to be talking about the complete inventory workflow process. And today's webinar is sponsored by Cinder. About myself, I'm a CPA, I'm a QuickBooks consultant. I operate from Miami, Florida. I have a YouTube channel. If you're unfamiliar with my YouTube channel, just search for my name, Hector Garcia, CPA in YouTube, and you're going to see plenty of content having to do with accounting, QuickBooks, etc. And there is my email if you need to email me directly. There are the learning objectives for today. Those are required for your CPE, so those are in the slide if you need to check them out. We're going to be covering briefly some important notes regarding inventory management for QuickBooks Online, some pros, cons, warnings about what QuickBooks Online does and doesn't do. Then we're going to be quickly talking about the debits of credits of inventory, so we have a clear understanding to which transactions in QuickBooks increase inventory and which transactions decrease inventory. Then we'll be talking about creating inventory items and mapping the associated accounts. We'll be discussing non-posting transactions such as purchase orders and estimates. Then we'll be moving to receiving inventory with a purchase order and without a purchase order, so you can see the contrast of those two workflows. Then we'll move into selling inventory with an invoice or a sales receipt. Then we'll discuss making inventory adjustments. And finally, we'll take a look at some inventory related reports. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A. Make sure that you write on the chat box, on the questions box, write your questions, and during the mini breaks that we'll be doing for the polling, I'll read them and I'll try to address them if they are related to the presentation. And then we'll leave the last 10 minutes to Cinder so they can talk about their app. Now, I have a list of things that we're not going to be covering just to make sure that we are aware that we're going to spend a whole hour talking about this, but we're not going to be covering any of these. So one, we're not going to be comparing desktop and online. That's a very long, deep conversation. So we're going to skip that in today's presentation. We're going to be talking about we're not going to be talking about non-inventory items or making manual adjustments into cost of goods sold or inventory asset. We're not going to be talking about whenever inventory is being managed outside of QuickBooks, such as e-commerce or point of sale system and what kind of entries you will need to do with that. We're not going to be discussing any potential workarounds for manufacturers. QuickBooks Online is not meant for manufacturers, so you kind of have to accept that from the get-go because it's just not going to be a great app for manufacturers. And we're not going to be talking about bundles, which is a feature inside QuickBooks that allows you to group items together. And we're not going to be talking about landed costs or inventory items in which the costs are derived from multiple transactions. All these are very tricky topics, and this could be a part two, right? But for today's, we're not going to be covering any of those. Now, a couple of really important notes regarding QuickBooks Online and inventory, and it's extremely important that we're clear about these. Let me just make sure. I don't know why they're not showing up. So let me delete these animations because they weren't showing up. Sorry about that. Okay, so number one, in order to run QuickBooks Online with inventory, you need to be on Plus or Advanced. Now, one common misconception is that people think that QuickBooks Online Advanced, it's got more stuff or it's got more features than QuickBooks Online Plus. They're both identical. So as long as you are on Advanced or QBO Plus, you're going to have the exact same features when it comes to inventory. QuickBooks Online uses FIFO, first in, first out valuation. It does not support for LIFO or average costing, so you can only work in FIFO. QuickBooks Online does not support sales orders, so there's no way to track back orders in QuickBooks Online. There's no way to track how many you have on hand versus how many you have available for sales, so you cannot track back orders. There's, as I mentioned earlier, no manufacturing support, so no inventory assemblies, no bill of materials, no multiple units to measure. QuickBooks Online does not have barcode support, so you cannot interact with a barcode scanner and your inventory. It does not support multiple warehouse bin locations. So in QuickBooks Online, all inventory is essentially in one location. It does not support lot numbers, serial numbers, or expiration dates. And you cannot add inventory items into the pictures. These are the top 6 to 7 questions I get the most from my clients when I'm doing inventory consulting And if you're going to work with QuickBooks Online, it's really important to know right off the bat, as of the date of this webinar, none of these features are available. If you want to work with QuickBooks Online and you want these features, you're going to have to look for a third-party app that manages inventory outside of QuickBooks, a topic for a different webinar. So let's dig right into the content here. Debits and credits of inventory. So first of all, you might want to memorize this because it'll behoove you as a QuickBooks consultant working with inventory. The transactions that essentially will increase your inventory, or the transactions that will debit your inventory, are a bill, a check, an expense, a customer credit memo, a customer refund receipt, and any positive inventory adjustment. So you had 10, now you're telling QuickBooks you have 15. That would be a positive inventory adjustment. That will make your inventory increase. Now, the transactions that will decrease your inventory are going to be your sales, right? Your sales receipts, your invoices, any vendor credits. This is you sending stuff back to your vendor. Any credit card credit, same thing, sending stuff back to your vendor and getting the money credited in your credit card. And a negative inventory adjustment where QuickBooks says you have 10, in reality you have 0. You reduce it by 10, you do a negative adjustment that decreases your inventory. And many transactions in QuickBooks will not affect your inventory items regardless of how you manage it. Estimates and purchase orders are non-posting that will never affect your inventory. Customer payments and bank deposits will never adjust or affect your inventory. Bill payments, transfers, and journal entries regarding what account is hitting, they will not affect your inventory items. So keep in mind that only the transactions that contain an area for you to add an item to that transaction can potentially affect your inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out from the presentation and do everything now inside QuickBooks. So I'm in QuickBooks Online right now, and the first thing you want to do is you want to turn on inventory in QuickBooks Online. So you're going to click on the gear menu on the top right of the screen, and then in the gear menu you're going to go into account and settings. Inside account and settings, I have to turn on my inventory feature. So if you go into sales, you're going to notice that down here somewhere you will have the option right here where it says products and services. When you click on that, it says track inventory quantity on hand. So you need to turn that on first. If that's turned off, your inventory will not be enabled. So that's kind of your first step that you have to turn that on. Immediately when you turn that on, you have to have products and services turned on in your sales forms, right? So your invoices, your sales receipts, they need to have an area for you to be able to select your product or service or your item. So you got to make sure you turn that on. I recommend showing the SKU column. Some businesses need the SKU, some don't. We'll be discussing SKU and how that works. And definitely track quantity, price, and rate. So you got to have all these things turned on in order for your inventory to work properly. So I'm going to go ahead and click on done. And then I'll go back into the settings and go to one more setting. I'm going to go back into account settings. And then under the advanced tab, let me see if I remember correctly, if it was the advanced tab. Where are might not be the advanced tab. It might be the expenses tab right here. So in the expenses tab, you're going to see an option that says purchase orders. You must click on that and you must turn on purchase orders. You want to turn on your inventory, tracking inventory. You want to turn on items in sales orders, and you need to turn on purchase orders, so that stuff will go in there. So it's an extremely important piece. And then right here where it says bills and expenses, you want to turn on where it says track expenses and items by customer. This makes sure that your expense transactions, your credit card charges, your checks, your bills have the option for you to add an item to it. So you want to turn that on in there as well. And notice how it says show items table on expense and purchase forms. You have to turn that on as well. So you got to turn all those things on in order to do everything that we're going to attempt to do here in the web, or not attempt to do, that we're going to do here in the webinar. So let's start by creating some inventory items. I'm going to click on the sales tab on the left hand side and then go down to products and services. You can also click on the gear menu on the top right of the screen, and then under list, under the second column, it says products and services. You can click on either one and get to the products and services screen. Now, one thing I strongly recommend is for you to organize your inventory by categories. I know many people don't have categories preset, but I strongly recommend that you figure out a way to sit down with the owner of the business, with the warehouse manager, with whomever, and say, hey, how can we organize your inventory in categories? 4, 5, 6 categories is good enough. Depending on the business, you might have 100 categories, who knows, but you want to organize them into categories to make it a lot easier to search and to find, and of course to filter. So I'm going to click on the More menu on the top right of the screen, right to the left of New. I'm going to click on More, and then I'm going to click on where it says Manage Categories. And I want to group my inventory by categories, create categories for my inventory products. So let's say, for example, that I sell both fruits and vegetables. I'm going to simplify this, and there's some there right now. We can ignore them for now. We're just going to do fruits and vegetables. So I create a new category here in the top right, and we're going to call this fruits. Okay, then I'm going to click on Save, and there's my one category, and then I'm going to click on the top right and then do vegetables. Okay, I hope I'm spelling that correctly. I don't type vegetables or eat vegetables very often, so that's why I might not be spelling it correctly. I'll go ahead and remove the other two categories. That way we don't see anything else but fruits and vegetables. Those are the only two categories we have set up. Perfect. I'm going to go back to products and services, and then I'm going to create some inventory items, some inventory products. I'm going to go ahead and click on New on the top right of the screen, and I'm going to select inventory. Notice that you have the option to create a non-inventory, to create a service, to create a bundle. If you don't have inventory turned on, you're not going to see that inventory option there. So you must have that option turned on in order to see that. So we'll go ahead and click on inventory, and let's create our first fruit. Let's do here banana, and under the SKU we'll just put a random number here. Let's assume the SKU, it's a barcode, or maybe it's a special code that your manufacturer uses. Maybe this is the code that you use for your point of sale system, for your e-commerce. In other words, you can have your name and your SKU as two different titles that you can use to manage that item, search the item, filter, find it, etc. Under category, we're going to go ahead and put this under the fruits category. And then under class, now, if you want your inventory items to automatically autofill the class that item is supposed to hit. So in other words, you want your financial statements, a profit and loss by class, for example. If you want your profit and loss by class to automatically be selected based on the item, then you can create a class for that. So I'm going to create a new class called fruits, and let's call them fruits. I'm going to call it fresh products. Make it even easier. So let's say that all my fruits and vegetables are going to be sold under fresh products, and maybe have another category and another class altogether. This is not the same as account. This is class, right? And then we can also play with our accounts as well. Now, initial quantity on hand, this is where a lot of people screw up. This is where someone will put the amount that they're ordering the first time that they're creating the product. This should always be 0 unless you specifically know what you're doing, that you're creating an initial inventory adjustment. But for the most part, you want to make that 0, and then as of date, I'm going to make this 1/1/2020, right? Because let's say this is the beginning of the year where we're managing information in QuickBooks. Now, reorder point, this would be at what point you want to replenish your inventory. So let's say that at all times I want to have at least 1,500 bananas, okay? Or 1,500 pounds of bananas, whatever the unit of measure is. Actually, we should probably do here banana pound, right? So I'm gonna make an extra step here to make sure that the name itself contains LB in it, right? So I know that is by pound, okay? Or I can call it maybe easier, banana by the pound, okay? Easy, simple to read. Then I'm going to scroll down here, and then it's going to ask me for my inventory asset. So if I wanted to group my inventory based on category, I want to group it by fruits, vegetables, or maybe by fresh products or whatever happens to be, I can create a separate inventory item account just for this one. For now, in order to avoid confusion, I'm just going to use the default inventory asset account, and all my products will go in my default inventory asset account. Now, under description, I could type my own description or just copy and paste the description from the item name. And let's say that we sell these for 58 cents. Okay, and then under income account, I'm going to create an account called fruit sales. Okay, I can even break it down and call it banana sales, depending on how in depth I want to go in my income accounts. But I'm just going to call it fruit sales, and then I'm going to come down here into purchase description. This is what is the item going to look like when I order through my vendor. So my vendor might have a different code, different nomenclature. If that's the case, I would use that in there. Now the cost, what I pay for these bananas by the pound, let's say is 25 cents. And then under expense accounts, I'm going to create an account called fruit COGS. Why? Because maybe I want to group all my sales by fruits and vegetables, income account, cost of goods sold account separately, so I can track it correctly. And then preferred vendor, let's say we buy these from Chiquita. So I'm going to go ahead and create my Chiquita vendor here, and then click on save and close. So creating an inventory item, pretty simple process. All right, let's go ahead and create a second inventory item. I'm going to go ahead and click on new, do inventory. And this would be, let's do lettuce. So we'll do lettuce by the pound. And this is going to be, I'm just going to type a random number here for this SKU. And the category in this case would be the vegetables category. And under class, this will still go into my fresh products class. Again, categories and classes, 100% customizable, right? So you will decide, obviously, depending on your business, how that stuff goes. So initial inventory quantity, as I mentioned before, all you want to do in here is put 0 and put the beginning of the year. And then reorder point, let's say I want to have at least 2,500 pounds of lettuce at all times. We said that we were not going to have multiple inventory asset accounts, so we'll continue to use the same inventory asset account. I'm going to go ahead and type in the description here. And the sales price, let's say I sell this for $1.15, and I'm going to put this into my, not my fruit sales, but my vegetable sales income account. Again, this is the part where you start customizing the QuickBooks to work for you. If you want to separate your fruit and vegetable sales in your profit and loss, you can do that. Same thing for my COGS account. I'll create a veggies cost of goods sold account and do a save and close. Let's say, for example, we pay 73 cents a pound for the lettuce, okay? And then the provider here would be American Greens Corp. I don't know, right? Making up a vendor's name. So American Greens Corp is who we buy the lettuce from, setting them up as a preferred vendor. Go ahead and click on save and close. And there we go. I created 2 inventory items. Now I have a big item list, potentially with a lot of stuff in it. Where my item list gets really big, it makes it particularly difficult to find and manage. So this little search button, this little filter button is pretty awesome. You just click on that and then click on category. I do fruits, click on apply, and there's just my fruits. I click on the filter again, category, select vegetables as well, right? So I got both of them selected. Click on apply, and then only my fruits and vegetables are showing up. Beautiful thing, beautiful thing. I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate my fruits here. I'm gonna right click on the little triangle next to the edit button on the column, on the action column, and then click on duplicate, and then I'm going to create a different fruit here. Let's do here mango by the pound. Okay, it's a tropical fruit company, right? So mango by the pound. I'll go ahead and put a different SKU number here. Make sure that goes into the fruits category, fresh products category. Perfect. Additional quantity on hand 1. Initial date, let's do 1/1/2020. So we'll put this back in 1/1/2020, and you can go farther back. You're not forced to do that. And let's say for mangoes, I want to have 1,200 pounds at all times, and we'll change the description here. We sell the mangoes for 89 cents. Put that into fruit sales, and let's say we buy them for about 41 cents, and that goes into fruit COGS. And let's say we also buy our bananas from Chiquita, okay? And then I'm gonna go ahead and click on save and close, and then duplicate my vegetable. Click on duplicate, and then let's do here, let's do carrots by the pound, okay? Make sure that all the categories and classes are all good. Beautiful. 0, you get the point. At this point, this is all redundant, but I want to set it up So we know exactly where we stand. Let's say we want to have 6,000 pounds of carrots at least at all points, at any point in time, and we sell this for 69 cents a pound, and we buy it for 31 cents a pound, and we also buy that from American Greens Corp. Save and close. There we go. So I got both my vegetables, both my fruits. I got two different types of inventory products. Some are in a fruit category. They're both pointing to the same class, but they're pointing, and they're also pointing, they're pointing to different income accounts and cost of goods sold accounts, right? But they all point to the same inventory asset account. And that part of the setup is really important, because I think most inventory setups kind of do and die by this specific setup, and that's kind of where they break. Now, something that's really cool here is inventory items that you're low in stock, or inventory items that you're out of stock. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and select all my other inventory items, and just to kind of simplify the world here, I'm going to batch make them inactive, just so I don't want to look at them anymore, and I just want to focus on those that are there. Now, for some reason, I can't. Okay, I can't do those two. Perfect. We're good. So it's just hours and sales that you cannot make inactive. So now the only inventory items we should see are the four that we created: fruits, vegetables, and that's it. There's two items here that are service items. I recommend that in order to avoid confusion, also put your non-inventory and your service items under a category. So I'm going to create a category up here. Let me click up here to more and go to manage categories. And then I'm going to click on new category, and I'm going to call this services. Click on save, and then go back into my item list. Select the two items that I don't want to be confused with my other inventory items. Go to assign category, services, and then in batch I can assign categories to existing items. That will make it much easier for me to read and follow along. So that will give you more or less an idea of how you can manage this list and make it much easier to navigate. Okay, so let's talk about now creating some orders or creating some sales for these items. So let's start with creating an estimate. I'm going to go ahead and go to new and go to estimate, and let's say one of my customers is asking me to sell them some bananas and some carrots. So I'm going to select my customer. Let's say my customer is Janice Johnson, and she wants to order 500 pounds of each, right? So in my estimate, I'm going to go ahead and put today's date on the estimate. I'm going to do banana here, okay? And then I'm going to put here 500. And then I'm going to select on the second line, I'm going to put here carrots. Whoops, CAR. There we go, carrots by the pound, and they want 500 as well. Let's say I negotiated a price with her, so the 58 cents will go down to 47, and then the 69 cents in this case will go down to 65. So you can modify the prices from the base rate on the fly. Obviously, you're not forced to use those the default prices by default. Okay, so I got my invoice for my estimate for $560, and then I'm just gonna click on save. Perfect. So I got my estimate created. Now let's say I have the inventory in stock. If I did, I can just go straight to create an invoice straight from the estimate. But in this case, I don't have it in stock because I just created the items. So now I'm gonna order a new set of product. I'm going to order some product for this order. So I'm going to click on the drop down menu here and click on copy to purchase order. What that will do is it will allow you to create essentially a purchase order for those items. But the one thing that is just kind of a quirky thing with QuickBooks is it won't ask you which vendor would you like to order for. If you copy it from the estimate, it will bring it all into one single purchase order, assuming that you're ordering everything from the same vendor, which is not the case. We're going to order the banana from one place and the carrots from the other place. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the second line here, because this purchase order is only going to be for the one vendor, which is American Greens, I believe. So let's do American Greens. Perfect. So I'm going to, this is Chiquita. So I'm going to order the bananas from Chiquita, And I'm going to go ahead and there's my purchase order. Let's assume everything in this is accurate. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And then I'm going to close the purchase order, go back to my original estimate. So a couple ways to do that. One, I can click on new and then click on estimate. And then I can click on the little time clock or whatever that is, history button, and then go back to that estimate and then create the second part of the estimate, which will contain the order for the other vendor, which is for the carrots. So I'm going to go here to where it says copy to purchase order, and then I'm going to delete the ones that are not meant for that particular vendor. And let's say this is going to be for American Green. So I created two different purchase orders for one particular sale. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save and close, and there we go. We got my two purchase orders created from the estimate. Now I can also create the purchase order. I can create the purchase order ahead of time without having to have an estimate. I can just create the purchase order from scratch in this case. So let's say, for example, I'm also going to order some inventory of the other stuff that's not in the estimate. I'm going to order that as well. So I'm going to click on new and go to, let's go to purchase order. So new purchase order, select Chiquita. Okay, and let's say that we're going to order Chiquita a different order. We're going to do bananas and what was the other fruit? Let's see what we have here. It was mango. Okay, there we go. So let's say we're going to order 1,500 bananas and 1,500 mangoes. Now you'll notice when I hover over quantity, it will tell me how many I have in stock, just if you want to check how much you have in stock before you actually order. And it tells you the reorder point. So if you want to not order more than you're supposed to, or know that you're supposed to order, that reorder point gives you contextually that information in there. So let's say that we really actually ordered that a couple of months ago. So I'm going to put that purchase order in there and backdate it to June. I'm going to go ahead and click on save and new and create a different purchase order from American Greens. And let's say that American Greens, we ordered some lettuce. Okay, and we ordered, let's say the reorder point is 2,500. So we'll go ahead and order 2,500 and then backdate that to, let's say, June 5th, and then click on save and close. So now I have a whole bunch of transactions that I created today, estimates, purchase orders, and just to keep in mind, none of this stuff affects my inventory. Purchases and purchase orders and estimates are all non-posting, so my inventory has not been affected. If you look at my inventory list, I still have zero of everything in stock. If you look at that column that says quantity on hand, everything is zero, essentially because non-posting transactions do not affect my inventory. One of the questions I often get is, Hector, how can I, when I'm in my item list, how can I organize so all my services are sort of grouped to the side and inventory to the other side? One of the things that you can do is you can go into manage categories and then services. What I can do in this case is I can add an asterisk or underscore or a character of some sort, maybe a number. That way, when I go back into my item list, it separates it from all my inventory items. So there's no other way to group it. Unfortunately, the only way to do that would be to basically change the name. We're tricking it out. Let's call it that. Now, one question I get is, Hector, I'm setting up QuickBooks for the first time. I have a whole bunch of inventory in stock already. I want to enter that initial inventory. How would I do it? So there's a couple ways you can do it. One, you can click on new inventory, create your item, and then enter your initial quantity on hand. Make sure you backdate that to whatever period is before you started using QuickBooks officially, so 12/31 of last year or whatever. You can do that. That's one way to do it. And then the other way to do it is to click on the drop down where it says new, and then click on import. And then in here, you can download the sample file so you can see what the file needs to look like for you to be able to do an import. And then let me open that up for you so you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom that in. So basically, this is a template with all the columns: product, services, name, SKU, type. You got price, income account, cost account. the Excel spreadsheet they give you contains all the columns that you can import. So if you import all those, and then on the quantity as of date, you put 12/31/2019, whatever that beginning period is, you can bring in all those inventory assets, all those inventory items. It will bring them into your inventory. It'll create an entry against equity. By the way, very important. It'll create an entry against equity, and it'll bring those initial inventory quantities. I personally prefer to be careful with adding that initial inventory quantity at the beginning, because most people enter the number that they're ordering on their very first order after they create the item, and that's obviously wrong. Okay. You can also convert those purchase orders to a bill once you're going to bring them in, once you're going to receive them. So the next step is I'm going to go ahead and go back to my purchase orders. I'm going to go to new, and then go to purchase order, and then I'm going to click on the history button to the left of the purchase order title, and I'm going to select any of my purchase orders that I'm about to receive. So let me select the first purchase order, and then from the purchase order, so from this screen, straight from this screen without having to do anything else, straight from this screen, I'm going to receive the inventory using this copy to bill button. So I'm going to click on copy to bill, and that's essentially going to create a bill, automatically select the vendor's name. Under the date, you can put the date in which you received this inventory that derived from a purchase order. Let's say this is on August 5th, 2020. And then you see here the items that were originally ordered on the PO. I can modify the amount, or modify the dollar amount if I was shortchanged, if I received less product, more product, or if there was a change on the price last minute. You can do that. So essentially, you can create the bill straight from the purchase order. I'm going to go ahead and click on save and close. And then the other thing you can do is you can create the bill and then recall the purchase order. That's another way to do it. So for example, I'm going to go to new, and then I'm going to go to bill, and I'm going to select my vendors. I'm going to select Chiquita here. So this is where I'm receiving the inventory. And notice on the right hand side, there's a drawer that opens up, letting you know which purchase orders are open. So from the bill screen, I can recall the purchase orders I have open. And in some cases, I will order 2 orders from my vendor, but then they will send me one invoice that contains multiple purchase order in it. That could happen. That's really, really feasible. So to do that, I'm just going to click on add and add. So I literally click on it from the drawer. And if you notice, as you scroll down, these items are going to be, or they should be showing here. Let me see. The items are not visible for some reason. Let me click on save and refresh that. I'm actually going to close out of this transaction and do it again. For some reason, it was glitching out. So I'm going to select Chiquita again. Chiquita. Select the first one. There you go. Select the second one. There we go. So then all the items come in here. I think I pressed one twice by mistake. Oh, okay. So yeah. So one purchase order had bananas and mangoes, and the other purchase orders had just bananas. That's why they look like they're duplicates. So I went ahead and I recalled the purchase orders from the bill, and they came into my bill. Let's say in addition to that, there's a shipping cost, right? So all you have to do is have a separate item for shipping cost. So I'll click on the drop-down menu, click on new because I haven't created yet. This is going to be a non-inventory or a service. And then we're going to call this shipping costs. And then we're going to have we're actually going to tell it that shipping cost is only for incoming shipping costs. I'm going to put this into my services category. Under class, I'm probably going to create a new class called shipping. So anything has to do with shipping sales or shipping costs will go into that class. And then I'm going to uncheck that this shipping cost gets sold to customers. That way the item is only used in a purchase transaction. So we're going to put this into shipping costs. I'm going to create an account called shipping costs, and then I'm going to make that cost of goods sold. Save and close. And then I'm not going to put a price there because it's going to vary every single time. Then I click on save and close, and then I add my shipping cost, which in this case is $250. So that usually will happen, right? Where you need to add shipping cost to the bill because the vendor itself is the one charging you the shipping. In the event that it's not the vendor who's charging you the shipping, that is coming from a different provider, then you would create a separate vendor or a separate credit card transaction, whatever it happens to be, for that. So the bill itself, I'm going to date it based on when the inventory was received. Even though the purchase orders both have different dates, the purchase order date is essentially when I ordered the product, but the bill date is when I received the product. Then if I have to pay this 30 days later or whatever, then I can select the due date for my vendor and select what the actual due date happens to be. Then I click on save and close, and that's it. Let me see to make sure that we don't have any issues here. Okay, let's just select the transaction. Not sure, it's giving me an error on the transaction for some reason. Let me try this again. That's a weird error. Let's do that again. So new bill, we'll select Chiquita, and then click on add and add. Date this on the 6th, make this payable on the 28th. Add a shipping cost line. Okay, and that was $250, and then click on save and close. Okay, well, this is a very strange one. So the purchase order was created before the transaction. Make sure the date in the transaction is right. This is sounds like a weird. Oh, I see what I mean. My original purchase order has a date after the date that I received it. That's why it's causing that problem. Let me go back and backdate this purchase order. And this is a new thing that QuickBooks does, where they make sure that your purchase order is dated before your bill date. And before, it didn't used to do that. They added that as an extra sort of security feature. Let's say if that takes care of that, so I'm going to receive both my purchase orders. This is on the 6th, payable on the 28th. Let me look at the purchase order dates. Okay, now my purchase orders are now backdated correctly. Let me click on save and close, and that did it. Okay, so yeah, that's good thing that happened, because quite honestly, this is actually a newer feature for me. I never create a purchase order ahead of receiving the inventory. In this case, in this example, it showed up. Good that it showed up, because it's good to mention it. Okay, so there we go. So now I can see inventory in stock. Notice that I have 2,000 pounds of bananas, 1,500 pounds of mangoes, 2,500 pounds of lettuce, and 0 carrots. And you can see up here it tells you how many are low stock. Low stock means they're below the reorder point, and out of stock means you have 0 or negative. You can actually click on these big buttons here. If I click on low stock, it will only show me the items that are below the reorder point, and I can click on that X there, or I can click on the big out of stock button, and it will only show me the out of stock items. What's really, really cool is here under the action button, under the drop down, you get all sorts of information like run report, adjust quantity, adjust starting value, reorder. For example, if I click on reorder, QuickBooks will basically generate a purchase order for me equal showing the specific item, and at this point I can hover over quantity and I can see what my reorder point is, how much is on a purchase order, and I can make a decision of how many more I want to reorder from here. So if I want to make this whole, I'll order 5,500, and then let's date this yesterday, and then I click on save and close. So these are all the sort of moving parts and options when it comes to purchasing and receiving inventory. Let's go towards the second half of this, which is making the sales and completing the sales cycle, and then looking at or understanding the reports of the sales cycle. Let's talk about making sales and then inventory reports. I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question, and then I'm going to go back into my inventory. Okay, so now we know all the transactions that affect our inventory. If I go into my balance sheet, so I'm going to go into my balance sheet real quick, and then I'm going to look at my inventory asset account. And if I click on the inventory asset account, I can see all the transactions that were affecting my inventory. So all the transactions affecting my inventory, they're going to be there. Every transaction that I've done for related to inventory. So these are the ones that we did, American Greens and Chiquita, and I also had other transactions in there. So I can see everything that relates to inventory in there. Now let's talk about bringing that inventory down, reducing that inventory. So I'm going to go into New, and then I'm going to click on Estimate, and then I'm going to go back and in the history and pull up the last estimate that we created. And now I can convert this estimate to an invoice. So I just click on Create Invoice on the right hand side of the screen. It tells me, would you like to invoice everything or a percentage? So I'm going to click on Everything, Create Invoice. Now I can successfully sell this inventory because I do have them in stock. Okay, except for vegetables. Notice that I can't sell the vegetables because those are on purchase orders. So I'm going to get an error selling these 500 vegetables. I can only sell the products that are in stock. It's a really good point. If you don't have something in stock, you don't want to create that negative inventory issue. So let's say I'm only going to partially invoice part of the estimate because it's what I have in stock. So I'll just simply just delete that line, click on the little trash, and then just invoice the ones that I'm going to ship, the ones that I have in stock. I'm going to go ahead and click on Save and New. Let's say I want to create an invoice from scratch. A new customer comes in and says, hey, I want to buy some mangoes. So I just pick my customer here, click on the drop-down menu, select my mangoes. I can hover over quantity to see how much I have in stock. Waiting for the hover to react. Oh, there it was. So I got 1,500 in stock, and I can tell my client, yeah, sure, I can sell you 1,000 out of 1,500. Perfect. So I negotiate with the customer a price of 88 cents, and then I click on Save and Close. You can also reduce your inventory by doing a sales receipt. So I go to New and Sales Receipt. Let's say my customer is going to pay me on the fly. He's going to pay me, let's say cash. He's going to pay me for those products. This is great for retail. And let's say customer A wants to buy some banana from me, and he wants to buy, let's say, 10 pounds of bananas. Okay, so it's a sales receipt. It will affect my inventory. The money is going into cash, whatever it happens to be, and then I save and close. A couple of things to mention is if I do a credit memo where I give my customer a credit to accounts receivable because returned inventory will go up. If I do a refund receipt where I give client money back for the inventory, that will make inventory go up. If I do a vendor credit where the vendor is going to give me a credit to my accounts payable because I'm sending inventory back to them, inventory is going to go down. If my vendor credits me, pays me back for inventory that I purchased, that credit will go down. So you really understand what transactions make inventory go up and down. Right? Let's talk about the last thing, which is inventory adjustment. So when I go into my products and services and I'm looking at my items and I'm pretty sure that I don't have 1,300 pounds of banana. Maybe some went bad. Maybe there's an error somewhere. I can just adjust that down. I went and I weighed my bananas and I only have 1,200. So now I need to make an adjustment. So I can make an adjustment by clicking on the drop-down menu and clicking on Adjust Quantity. And then let's say on today's date, and I'm going to have an account called Inventory Shrinkage. You can call this whatever you want. I can send it maybe back to my fruit cost of goods sold account, whatever I want. And I'm going to adjust this now to 1,200, telling QuickBooks that I now have a negative inventory adjustment, which is 190 units, which is going to go down in whatever the value equivalent of that is. And then I click on yes, and that's it. That's how you adjust your inventory. You can also adjust your inventory up. It turns out that I actually have 100 pounds of carrots. So I just click in here and click on Adjust Quantity, select the same account, and then this is going to go up to 100 pounds, and this will be a positive inventory adjustment. I'll do a save and close and click on yes. Finally, we got reports. When I go into reports, I can search for a couple of inventory reports. I'll type inventory in my search. I got a physical inventory worksheet. That report is useful for me to print this out. Let me show this in PDF. You print that out, give it to your warehouse manager and say, go count, right? And then they'll go count and then they'll fill in what the actual amount you have in stock is, and then you will go back and do an adjustment based on that inventory, physical inventory worksheet. One really important thing is this worksheet is based on current count, not historical count. The other report is the inventory valuation report. The inventory valuation report is historical, so I can choose as of when I have this inventory in stock. So as of the 28th, I have $2,300 worth of inventory. If I go back to the beginning of the month and click on Run Report, I didn't have any inventory at all because I hadn't received any. So that's the neat thing about the valuation report, that is date driven. Okay. There are a couple more inventory reports, but there really isn't more time to cover it all. It's difficult to cover that much content in 1 hour, but I try to do it justice within the allotted